own, to live up to our own stated aspirations and stated objectives as a government.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Before I come to Femi, just one last question. You have been a professor of law. Now you have been a student of governance under the President Muhammad Buhari. At the end of his tenure in 2023, will you say you have been a good student to rise to lead the leadership of Nigeria?
Well, Nduka, let me just say that question appears to me to be loaded. And I'm not going to take the bait. Frankly, let me say to you that one learns every day. And I am learning every day, and I pray that God helping us, by 2023, I would have learned a great deal. But I will not, of course, as you know, today I'm completely focused on what it is that we're confronted with. We are confronted, as the Right Honorable Speaker has said, with possibly the gravest pandemic, the greatest public health crisis of our generation, and possibly the greatest economic decline, global economic decline of our generation. So we are challenged by these very significant issues, and we are in some senses privileged, and at the same time, we must approach it with a great deal of humility. We are privileged to be in service at this time, to be called upon to resolve some of these great issues. So that is where my focus is today, how I will learn, what I will learn. Of course, the coming years will be the only judge of that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. The fight against Boko Haram, or the fight by the armed forces, is not as impactful because they have not been given the right resources. If you look at your budget, will you truly say you have brought or appropriated enough money to the armed forces to fight insecurity, or to the police to fight banditry, when the world is currently governed by technology? What are you doing to resource our security agencies?
Okay, sorry, I lost you for a minute. Yeah, thank you, Nduka. Yes, once again, a good question, very deep question. The issue of security is perhaps the most important leg of what is of the three legs upon which this government came into power. And if you look at it from the time the Buhari-led government came into power till date, a lot has been done, particularly in the Northeast. Now, that is not to say that it's Uhuru. No, it's not. There's so much more to be done, so much more. And funding, like you rightly observed, is perhaps one of the greatest drawbacks that we have. Why is that so? You can only spend what you have. And within the limited resources, dwindling all revenue and the rest of it, what is budgeted for, or what is budgeted from the executive is hardly ever touched by the National Assembly in trying to rearrange distribution of resources. The defense budget remains almost sacrosanct anytime it comes to the National Assembly. But what we're looking at now, and what I think needs to be done, and I think this is what is done in times of war in even more advanced democracies, is that you look beyond and outside your budget and your revenue, and you look for alternative sources of revenue to fight your war. If we agree that we're in war times, then we need to look outside the box. If we do not have enough resources, and I think there's a bill right now on the floor of the House. I think it's first reading in terms of alternate funding for our military. I believe that will get speedy passage through the House and the Senate, and go to the president for accent. Yeah, so for assent. And I totally agree with you. Funding remains very key. We are in an IT world. We need to move from the bricks and mortars and bow and arrow conventional warfare to IT, technologically driven equipment and warfare, and that's what we need to fight Boko Haram. Boko Haram is an unusual organization. I mean, it's like the more you look, the less you see. The only way you can fight them, in terms of because they're even a more advanced guerrilla warfare. The only way you can fight them is through technology, and technology is very expensive. And we need to look at foreign aid. We also need to look at the issue of there's the Leahy Act in America and some other legislation in the United States that actually makes it difficult for us to actually get arms from the United States and some other advanced democracies. Some pin it on our human rights abuse, but I think it's something we perhaps through the back channel, the legislative arm of Nigeria and the legislative arm of the Congress of the United States need to talk about in terms of either exempting Nigeria from this Leahy Act, which stops them from working with us in terms of purchasing of arms, and that's what we're looking into. If our human rights abuse record, quote and unquote, I do not believe rises to the level where we should be affected by the Leahy Act. But these are areas that we'll look into. We cannot successfully fight Boko Haram, and I'll be the first to say so, if we do not equip our military, if we do not boost their morale, and if we do not do what is supposed to be done for men and women who stake their lives every day, who put their boots on ground, and sometimes pay the ultimate sacrifice just to protect you and I. I think it's very important. I think it should be priority because if you don't have it, it's only a secure nation that can thrive economically, politically, socially. So I totally agree with you. And these are the things we're doing. Perhaps most importantly, the new bill that is just going through the first reading in the House of Representatives to find alternative means of funding. I said earlier that the Police Reform Act has already just left the National Assembly, and in that act is embedded resources and distribution and emoluments for the police, men and women in uniform, to enhance their pay and their conditions of service.
Sorry, just a quick question on your Police Reform Act. Does your Police Reform Act have provisions for regional security outfits to be armed so they can help the police?
Well, for us, the policing is right now disconnected from the people. There's a structural disconnection. So much so that the Nigerian police force is now almost like an occupying army in many places across the country. So we have started experimenting already with what you call community policing. But two things are already missing from that effort, and that is accountability and partnership with the community itself. So to have regional police, as you put it, I personally believe you will need a constitutional amendment because that goes to the very structure. You will need a constitutional amendment, and the process of constitutional amendment is totally different from the Police Reform Act, which just passed the House and the Senate. So what we did was a shortcut to recognize community policing, and perhaps we will escalate it when we start on our constitutional amendment next month. And then that will involve everybody. It will involve public hearings. It will involve the people. It will involve states. It will involve governors. It will involve emirs. It will involve obas. It will involve a constitutional amendment, which will involve all stakeholders in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Vice President, there are two issues that should interest you. One is a new law called Karma, which requires maybe churches, if they fall foul of the law, to be taken over, is it by trusteeship?